There was an election this weekend in Turkey, and the results are very interesting, especially for the United States. We have Erdogan winning by a slim margin, and there's a lot of outcry in the country as to whether or not this was an honest election. But also we need to take a look at what is going on in terms of the powers that he is assuming, how this is going to affect their moves towards the European Union, and whether or not it reflects the idea that NATO really is useless and an anachronism. Clearly, he thinks that's the case because he doesn't mind running through these dictatorial reforms, which are going to keep them out of NATO, out of the European Union. Nobody's keeping them out of the European Union, however. They have a massive, as one of these articles puts it, a massive diaspora. They were campaigning throughout Europe for this referendum, and that tells us something right there. They're not interested in official membership in the European Union. They're interested in making it Eurabia. And clearly, NATO is nothing that they're concerned about at all. Now, as Bloomberg points out, they ratified the supremacy of Erdogan's rule by taking aim at political opponents both at home and abroad. Supporters chanted that he should bring back the death penalty. Erdogan warned opponents not to bother challenging the legitimacy of his win. He told them to prepare for the biggest overhaul of Turkey's system of government ever, one that will result with him having even fewer checks on his already considerable power. They point out this was a very divisive 2-month campaign during which they went to Europe, remember, and they called people who said, we don't want you campaigning here for your elections. He called them Nazis, as he was going there to campaign for Hitler-like powers. Isn't that interesting? And as Bloomberg points out, he made this decision because he wanted to lobby the diaspora. The diaspora, isn't that interesting the way they put that? Because that is what is truly happening. They don't need to be in the European Union. They're going to take over the European Union. The constitutional changes mean that Erdogan could potentially hold the reins until 2029. That's a decade longer than the rule of Ataturk, the father of the modern secular nation, whose legacy he sought to roll back. And I think that's very important. You have to understand that when we look at this competition, and we're going to look at the pushback against the people who follow his opponent, Fethullah Gulen, when you look at that, we always want to think that there's a white hat and a black hat, spy versus spy. There's a good guy, there's always a bad guy. No, a lot of times there's just two bad guys. Both of these guys want a global caliphate. They just want to be the one to run it. And they have, they're just a couple of dictators who are competing against each other. That is a good example of why we do not want to get involved in regime change in country after country throughout the Middle East. We see that even when we have bad people, like Omar Gaddafi, or even Saddam Hussein, when we throw these people out of office, what do we get in their place? Do we get anything that's any better? No. Often we get something that is far, far worse. So no, we should not be getting involved in this. We should not be going abroad, seeking monsters to destroy, as Adams warned us. Says it'll give him greater sway also over fiscal policy, and it will raise many people's concerns about the independence of the central bank. He's going to abolish the prime minister, so forth and so on. And so he is setting up a true dictatorial power there. He has ruled with a very heavy hand, but there is something of a civil war that is going on in Turkey. As many people are pushing back against this, saying that they saw a lot of unusual things that were happening in the referendum, they move on in this direction. International observers who monitor the voting also found irregularity, says the AP. They said the conduct fell short of international standards. Specifically, they criticized a decision on Sunday by Turkey's election board to accept ballots that did not have official stamps, saying that it undermined safeguards against fraud. And it was a very close election, actually. It was 51.4% to 48.6%. An associate professor at Lawrence University said Erdogan has ruled with a narrow victory before. He doesn't see a narrow victory as anything less than a mandate. He's not going to pull back. He's not going to take a look at the suspect ballots. And we know exactly where this is going. It has consequences for us here at home. Again, his competition, Fethullah Gulen, has a lot of ties with the CIA here in America and with a massive school network that we've reported on in the past. Before we go to that, I want to look at a Breitbart article that looks at Islamic kindergartens, and they say it leads to parallel societies and extremism in Austria. This is a study that was done at Vienna University by Adnan Aslan, a Turkish-born Austrian professor. He looked at 10,000 children aged 2 to 6 years old, attending 150 Muslim preschools that taught the Quran, just like Christian schools would teach the Bible. But at these schools where they teach the Quran and kindergarten, they found that at least a quarter of them were backed by groups that propagated arch-conservative strains of Islam, like Salafism, or organizations that see religion not just as a private matter, but as integral to politics and society. Folks, we've said this all along. Islam is not simply a religion. It is a political system. And when you look at Sharia law and the imposition of Sharia law and the fact that most of the people polled who are living in the West now believe that Sharia law is just fine, that should be established in Western societies. Here's what else he pointed out, and this is why you have to understand that it's not just the people who are coming in this first generation. The second generation will be even more polarized because they create ghettos. He said parents are sending their kids to establishments that ensure that they are in a Muslim setting and that learn a few surahs, okay? But they're unaware that they're shutting them off from a multicultural society. So as they become more and more isolated in these schools, they become more and more ghettoized, and they become more and more resentful of the society in which they live. That's why the second generation is even more dangerous than the first generation. A small percentage of the first generation that comes in will be terrorists. We've seen that already. We know that's going to happen. But an even larger percentage will become terrorists that will have been born in the country that we see because of this type of isolation that is cultural, religious, and legal. Now, what is happening in this country? We reported on this back in December of 2015. There is a competition between Fethullah Gulen and Erdogan. And in this country, we had Fethullah Gulen brought in by the CIA. They wrote letters to get him in because there were those who said, we don't want someone who wants to establish a worldwide caliphate. But now he runs and associates a large network of charter schools. This is something that we need to think about when we look at charter schools that are being pushed by this new Secretary of Education. Already, these charter schools, and they are not specifically religious because they couldn't get the money if they were in the United States. So they do it in a very low-key way, but they get $500 million with a B, $500 million a year of taxes that are supporting these charter schools. And as Mark Hall, who did the documentary Killing Ed, said, these are funds that you and I are giving to our government. They're going directly to this organization. So while in Islamic countries, the Gulen schools are Islamic madrasas, Gulen schools in the U.S. have to carefully avoid any overt religious proselytizing to Islam. But what you see in the schools here in the United States and elsewhere is an intense national Turkification of their children. These are not Turkish kids. These are kids that have a variety of backgrounds, Hispanic, Asian, African American. And you know that they're being taught intensely about Turkey and about Islam. Meanwhile, we see that there's an investigation here in the United States that is being pushed by Erdogan, saying we need to investigate people who have ties to Fethullah Gulen. And we have to understand that both of these individuals, both Erdogan and Fethullah Gulen, have their hooks in a lot of American politicians. Fethullah Gulen, for example, has ties to Chuck Schumer, to ex-CIA Director Brennan. This is allegations from Erdogan. This is the kind of way that they work into our society. This is what we really have to guard against. Meanwhile, very quickly, we're about out of time in this segment, there is going to be a legalization of cannabis, they believe, in Canada. But it's not going to fully legalize it. They're going to leave a lot of tripwires. This is something that we all have to be aware of. They say that they're going to be regulating recreational marijuana by July 2018. They want to be the first country in the G7 to fully legalize marijuana. They've tabled a couple of bills designed to end more than 90 years of prohibition. Despite decades of criminal prohibition, Canadians, including 21% of our youth, they said, and 30% of our young adults continue to use cannabis at the highest rates in the world. Well, of course, the reason for that would be that prohibition doesn't work. It has always failed. And yet, they're going to be, as they're talking about full legalization, they're also talking about massive jail terms if you don't do it within their tightly prescribed boundaries. If you're caught driving high, you could go to prison for 10 years. Stay with us when we come back. Leanne McAdoo is going to have more on Google's delisting of InfoWars, their public-private partnership for censorship. We'll be right back.
Alex Jones here with a very important news update to anybody out there that wants to be prepared. But it goes beyond being prepared. Our bodies absolutely must have the good halogen iodine or we will die. and you look at all of the thyroid problems and all the people that don't have energy and that have all sorts of hormone problems. And from my research, and a lot of just mainline research, it leads back to iodine over and over and over again. It's as important as vitamin C. If you don't get iodine, you die. But most people are just deficient, so they're low energy, they're sick. You got to have iodine in your body so that your body can produce the hormones you need. It is the base to so many things. And since I got into iodine 4 years ago, we've helped change the entire paradigm by developing and bringing to the public deep earth crystals from 7 to 12,000 feet of the purest iodine available. Other iodine comes from the ocean or from other byproducts of chemical facilities and is tainted. It's bound. It's not absorbable. I tried it. And I had incredible effects even with dirty iodine because the body needs it. When you don't have iodine, it absorbs the chlorine, the fluoride, and all these other bad halogens. Do yourself and your family a favor and check out the importance of iodine for yourself. I think you're going to be blown away. And whatever you do, support the broadcast and get a bottle of Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2. Also consult your physician because if you've been deficient in it or have other issues, it can have some dramatic effects. As for me and most folks I talk to, it's been a game changer in the positive column, but still consult your physician because iodine is no joke. It's a key building block of the body. And if you haven't had it for a long time and suddenly have it, some folks say they've experienced things like a detoxing effect and things like that. You've got to have vitamin C. You've got to have iodine to live. You got to have water to live. Iodine is key. You must have it, but consult your physician first before you get powerful Survival Shield Nascent Iodine X2 at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll free. We can answer your questions, 888-253-3139.